Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGeek webinar series, our endeavor to impart techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Project Execution Plan, Importance and Relevance, and this is the 19th session in the Project Management Leadership series. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Kumar Saurabh, Assistant General Manager and Head of Department Strategic Planning in Samsung Heavy Industries India Private Limited. He is also a PMI India champion. Samsung Heavy Industries India Private Limited is part of Samsung Heavy Industries, a group company of Samsung, a South Korean conglomerate having net sales of about $11 billion and 23,000 employees all over the world. Mr. Kumar Saurabh is a project management and project control specialist and a certified project management professional from Project Management Institute, USA. He has been associated with projects related to oil and gas, petrochemical and infrastructure projects. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Mr. Kumar.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to be part of this particular session, and it's actually my privilege to be addressing to a huge group of people who have found time on a Friday to be part of this project execution plan, importance and relevance session. I hope I am able to do justice to your Friday evening, and we end this week on a good and a happy note. So today's session is all about project execution plan, importance and relevance. To begin with, just a brief introduction about me, further to what has already been told. I'm basically heading the Department of Strategic Planning in Samsung Heavy Industries. One of the things which I have, I would say I've cultivated over the years is that my passion for project management, and that has kept me so-called in the loop of project execution and the things that are happening in the project management field. I have been recognized as a project PMI India champion, part of a group which is a full-fledged program by an initiative by Project Management India. And I'm also a member of the PMI North India chapter newsletter, Synergy, that's the name of the newsletter. And we have been, I've been there since we started, since this newsletter was germinated. There's also an article which was published in Chemical Engineering World, Avoiding Catastrophes in Project Execution. That was in October 2012. Now let's start with the main session, and that is all about project execution plan. Now before we go by the slides, let me put in some thoughts which I could gather from various sources. I found some of them pretty interesting and some of them pretty thoughtful. Project managers should not be praised for starting a job, but for finishing it. That's what, the moment we hear of a word plan, the fundamental thing that comes to our mind is, it's just a plan. Now what is being executed has got maybe little or no relevance, or just a slight relevance with the plan. But that's not the case, and that's what we are going to discuss in this entire session for the next hour or so. Planning without action is futile, and action without planning is fatal. For a project manager, overruns are as certain as death and taxes. A good project manager adheres to schedule, whereas a project champion meets targets. So there's a huge difference between these two words. And of course, the most valuable and least created document in project management is Plan B. So the moment there is a problem, it's always a firefighting mode. Now, those are some of the things which we plan to discuss in this entire session on how do we actually avoid the firefighting mode. The project execution plan, so to say, is bound by the 10 knowledge areas clearly elucidated in the Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, 5th edition. That's PMBOK, 5th edition of Project Management Institute, EMI. These 10 knowledge areas, now the project execution plan has to encompass all these knowledge areas. Otherwise, the moment one of these knowledge areas are left open-ended, it's the beginning of chaos. So these knowledge areas are integration, scope, time, cost, quality, human resource, communication, risk, procurement, and the stakeholders. Now to start with, what is the objective of making a project execution plan? The major objective should be very clear at the beginning. It's not just a document. It's a very important document that formulates plans, establishes procedures, clearly defined procedures to efficiently and effectively manage execution. So that has to be the objective. It's not one particular document which is generated just for the sake of having it in our records that yeah, there is a PEP. No, that's not the objective. It should be an objective. It should be a document which is used throughout the execution of a project for efficient and effective management of a project. So what are the things that are part of the project execution plan? First of all, it should have a summary. Now the summary will have the project snapshot. It will have, if the project snapshot is the basic snapshot, who is the client, what is the location. Now I was just going through the list of attendees. Most of the attendees, majority I would say, is belong to the IT field. But unfortunately, my area of working or my area of experience is mostly in the oil and gas sector. So my presentation might have slight affiliation or slight leaning towards projects which are on the EPC mode. That's the engineering, procurement and construction mode. So there might be some things which might be slightly off tune for the IT people, but more or less for the majority or for the entire scope understanding or for the entire gamut of this presentation, it all focuses on the project execution fundamentals guided by the 10 knowledge areas. So to continue with the project execution plan summary, it should have a project snapshot. That's the basic thing. Who's the client? Who's the consultant? Who are the start time, the end time, where's the location, and all those broad things. A broad level scope of work. Now here in the project summary, we are not talking of a detailed scope of work. That gets detailed at a, we'll get into those in the subsequent slides. We are talking of a broad scope of work. Location, details of the location. Now again, that's where we concentrate. The location, depending on the micro level location, our entire project execution plan might change. So if we are executing a project in Gujarat, it might have different flow. It might have a different philosophy. If we are executing a project in Assam, it might have a different philosophy. If we are executing a project in North Sea, it might have a different philosophy. So that's the reason the micro level location is also very important. Salient features of a project and the work breakdown structure at a very high level. In the project summary, we are not talking of a broad work breakdown structure. At a detailed level, we are talking of a broad level WBS. So these are the salient features that are part of the project summary. The vision of a project execution plan should be very clear. The entire focus of executing a project is guided by the vision. The vision might be expansion to a new location, these are just two of the guidelines or two of the parameters which might be part of a vision, but generally it is this thing. It actually gets encompassed into these two major visions, that is expansion to a new location and or build relationship with new clients. The vision should be very clear whenever we are preparing a project execution plan. Now, what is the end goal? At the end of the project, when the project is executed, when the project is completed, what is the end goal that we are planning to achieve? So what is the target goal that we are talking of? The most important thing is co-reliability. That is what we are talking in terms of goodwill, in terms of repeat customer, in terms of a broader expansion of the base. So those co-reliability becomes very important. Timely completion, of course, that's the key. Now, being part of the Samsung group, I would say that we are obsessed with schedule. So Samsung works on that's the USP of Samsung group. We complete project before time. We are the people who insist on a client to have a bonus clause, and we have on most of the occasions we have got that bonus clause value. So that's one of the USPs, and that's one of the cultures which is part of the Samsung culture. Best performance, nothing to be said about it. Effective QA/QC management. Know the schedule adherence, meeting targets, not at the cost of any QA/QC flaw. Absolutely not acceptable. So this can only be done when we have a proper and an effective QA/QC management in place. Zero error safety. No room for any errors. Safety cannot be compromised. Safety is prime. And of course, as an end contractor or as the person or as an organization executing a project, naturally we would like to make profit. So cost optimization should be the goal. Now, these are some of the 6 parameters that should be part of the goal, which at the end of the project execution, and the entire project execution plan should flow along these goals. So the goal should be an undercurrent in the entire project execution plan. Now we come to the key success factors. How do we achieve those goals, and what are the key success factors? Here I would like to spend some more time on this slide. First one is the effective progress tracking. By effective, what we mean is that we already have, as part of the project execution plan, as part of the project controls plan or the planning package, we always have the how to monitor progress, how to track the progress. That's something which is always there. Otherwise, you won't even know where you are heading towards. But how do we have an effective progress tracking? What are the mechanisms that we want to use to have an effective progress tracking? One of the things which immediately comes to our mind, or which we have been implementing in all our projects, is an early trigger mechanism. Now, early trigger mechanism is something, it is a culmination, or it is a combination of what if analysis and the present existing scenario within the constraints. It's always easy to have the status of a shortfall or where we are ahead of the schedule at the end of the reporting period, but that doesn't solve the problem. The problem is, instead of the area of focus is that instead of having a curative approach in case of an overrun or a slippage, we are talking of a preventive approach. Now that's an early trigger mechanism. We have various tools which we implement or which we use for having an early trigger mechanism. We have a 15-day look ahead, for example. We have a 30-day look ahead depending on the schedule, depending on how we are progressing. We might have we also have maybe a 24 hours look ahead. If it's something where it involves high capacity cranes deployment, for example, or we are talking of something where the resources are very limited and they are very expensive, then we might have a trigger mechanism at every level. But ideally, the early trigger mechanism starts at 90 days look ahead. So that's one of the early trigger mechanisms which we have been using. Key success factors: close coordination with the stakeholders. We'll do a stakeholder analysis as we go about this particular presentation. But until and unless we have a close coordination with the stakeholders, the entire thing, the entire effort goes down the drain. So we are very clear that there has to be clear-cut close coordination. Now, close coordination can be through emails, can be through teleconferences, video conferences on a weekly basis, on a fortnightly basis, or face-to-face meetings on a weekly or a fortnightly basis, depending on the project duration and the sensitivity of a particular project. But till we have a very close coordination, that's one of the key success factors. Then we are talking of optimized resources. Again, it's a self-explanatory term. Error-free quality output. We've already discussed that. That the quality the output has to be of world-class quality. Otherwise, the organization or the team that is delivering this output isn't a global standard team. Again, the key success factor: we are here to make money. It always has to be a positive cash flow. Now, it's actually, when we are talking of various resources, the projects that we execute, they run into 2 years, 3 years duration. Maintaining a positive cash flow, that's the inflow should be higher than the outflow, is something which we have to plan well in advance, so that we don't land up in a situation where because I'll tell you, the type of projects that we do, they are high risk projects. There are many multiple issues that come up. There are multiple risks, external, internal risks that might crop up at any point of time. Maybe an environmental risk, a political risk, something of an economic risk, especially nowadays. So we need to have those proper safeguards, and that's the reason a positive cash flow is very important. Clarity of statutory regulations. Now again, this is purely, I won't say purely, but yeah, it's very important when we are executing projects of our nature, which are oil and gas, a polluting sort of industry. So we need to be very clear that we don't pollute, or we are not instrumental, or we are not responsible for creating more pollution in the environment. So statutory regulations, very important aspect, and clear understanding of taxation and laws. If you don't have this thing at the beginning of a project execution, at the beginning of a project, you can be rest assured that we are going to, and unfortunately, I've been there in this industry, or I have an experience of more than 16, 17 years. Trust me that we have faced many situations where we did not actually look into the taxation and the laws into that micro level detailing, and we had to face problems in terms of schedule, in terms of time, in terms of cost. It actually affected us. So we need to, these are some of the key success factors that need to be very clear while we are preparing the project execution plan. So what is the strategy that we need to adopt? Communication procedure. Right at the beginning of the project, when in the project execution plan, the communication procedure, the communication protocol should be very clearly defined. There are a lot of stakeholders involved. There's a lot of possibility for chaos to erupt at a time when we would least want it. So it's very important to have a proper communication procedure with the right flow of inputs, process, and the output, and the stakeholders and the key people, the key parties which are involved in the communication procedure. So execution strategy should have a very well-defined communication procedure. The other thing is that for the item which should be covered in the project execution plan is a productivity analysis. Now, productivity analysis is basically how much you are spending and how much you are earning. So based on a proper and an effective productivity analysis mechanism, we would come to know much earlier of project execution that what is the estimate to complete and the expected at completion. So ETC and EAC will depend on how effective our productivity analysis mechanism has been defined. Then one of the things that we should always, we have been using as a execution strategy tool is an action and decision register. So what happens, now I'll tell you how we have been using it. Maybe many of you must be using this particular register with a different name, maybe an action item register or an action item log or an event log register. The basic idea of having an action and decision register is that whatever, I'll just give you an example. Now we have a minutes of meeting. Generally we have those meetings which take place and the minutes of meetings are prepared. The MOMs, they are just part of an MOM and the MOM tracking takes place in isolation. The basic fundamental of having an action decision register is that instead of preparing a minutes of meeting, we put all those items in the action and decision register. So every item which is discussed, which requires an action or a decision post meeting, is logged in the action decision register and that is monitored. So at the end of a particular project execution, maybe 1.5 years or 2 years, whatever is the duration, we have a complete log of action and decision register where the items are mentioned. What we do is we also mention the raised forum, whether it was raised in a minute meeting or whether it was raised through an email which we had received, or it was part of a directive that we received from some particular stakeholder. So that raised forum is always mentioned, and we write down what is the action, what is the decision that needs to be taken up, and we keep monitoring what action has been taken, what is the status, and if the action is closed or not. So at the last of this particular worksheet, we have a column which talks of open stroke closed. So it's open/closed. The moment an action is taken, the action date is recorded, the action decision is recorded, and it's marked as closed. So that's the beauty of this action decision register, that even maybe after 1 month or 1.5 months, somebody might say, what was the decision that was taken place? And we already have it in the action decision register. So it's a very exhaustive log which is maintained, and it's really helpful. We have been using it and in all the projects, and it has been very helpful in terms of for getting the output. Then we need to have a proper infrastructure and IT sector in place before for the executions, for effective executions as part of an effective execution strategy. Earned value management, the SPI, the CPI, and all those stuff, that's very important. The earned value analysis, the planned value, PV, EV, AC, that gives the health of a particular project. So that's again part of the tool of execution strategy. Review meeting schedule, it should be very clear right at the beginning of, or it should be part of the project execution plan, the schedule of review meetings, because that gives a directive. That's a proper calendar with the stakeholders involved and the main coordinator of the meeting. Procurement and subcontract procedure, we'll get into details of this as we go along. Then we have the change management. Another thing which we have been stressing on at the beginning of the project execution plan, because we need to have a very clear-cut, very well-defined change management mechanism right at the project execution plan stage itself. The reason is very simple. The changes come at a time when everybody is more than occupied and they are more than busy, and that is the that's the last moment where we would want to involve, or where we would want to utilize or divert our minds and our efforts in evolving a procedure. So change management is part of the project execution plan. Risk management again is part of the project execution plan as an effective execution strategy. We'll get into the details. One of the things that we have been doing, especially as an EPC organization, and more relevant to engineering organization, which again is applicable to all other industries as well, that we also have a third eye review. Now, third eye review is at the start of a project, we list down the deliverables, the output or the deliverable output that is to be given or passed on to the customer, end customer. Some of these deliverables are very critical in nature, and we would want a third eye perspective from a person who is not part of this particular execution, who is not part of the task force, and who is but who's an experienced person and expert in the field which is being executed. But it should be very clear that the person should not be, because the moment a person becomes part of the task force, that person cannot do a third eye review. So that person is biased. So we always have a third eye review of only the critical items which are flagged at the beginning of a project. Then an effective S-curve and schedule, proper reporting mechanism, and the closeout. Again, we'll get into the details of these things as and when. A typical organization, again, like I said, I belong to the oil and gas sector and the EPC sector. So we generally have a project manager, and there's also a project director. Then we have a PEM, a project engineering manager. Under that person, there are project engineers who are controlling or who are coordinating with the various engineering disciplines like mechanical, instrumentation, electrical, process, piping, civil, structure, architecture. Then we have a procurement manager. The basic four things that are part of the procurement management: there is a buyer, there is an expediter. Like I said, that we deal with projects uh, which are of a very high magnitude. So there are different mechanical equipment. There might be a transformer, there might be heat exchangers, there might be compressors, and all of these are given to the approved vendors or the manufacturers who are of global standard, but they are all overloaded. So there needs to be an expediter who expedites the manufacturing of fabrication. So it's a proper work in itself. It's a proper role in itself. It's a full-time role. Then there's an inspection and logistics. Again, since they are high value and oversized and overweight, over-dimensioned or overweight items maybe, or even the smaller items, they need to be, they are from, like I said, we might be executing a project in Gujarat, but we might have the compressor from Europe. So the logistics also it plays a very, very, very vital part in the entire project organization. Then we have the site manager, we have the resident manager, we have the field control manager, which is the equivalent of a project control manager in a design. Okay. Now, for the stakeholder analysis, we need to identify the stakeholders. It's very important again that we need to have a very clear understanding of the stakeholders, who controls change management, who will take the decisions, who controls the resources, who has the specialist skills the project needs, who has influence. Now, this is very important. While we are doing a stakeholder analysis, there might be the person who might be a nuisance. There might be a stakeholder who might be a nuisance, but that person might be the most influential in terms of project execution. Earlier we identify that, the better it is for us. Who gets the rewards and benefits? One of the things that is generally neglected, I won't say generally, but yeah, at times it is not taken care of, and the project clear examples that come to my mind is the Narmada Dam project or Singur. You're all aware of the situations that have happened. Now, maybe I'm not naming anybody. I'm not going into the case study, or I'm not getting into the details of the project, the Tata Nano project. But maybe the people who would have suffered the consequences were not taken into consideration. That was the case. So we need to be very clear on who suffers the consequences, who provides the inputs, and who gets the output. That's identifying the stakeholders, classifying the stakeholder positions. Depending on the people, we classify them into groups, the stakeholder names. Third point, very important, who has the ability to the commitment level and everything has been identified, then we do a stakeholder management approach. So what is the approach for each and every stakeholder? That is again being done. Now again, let us get into a very important aspect, especially in our industry. It's HSSE, that's Health, Safety, Security and Environment. Now with HSSE, there are various certifications. For quality, there's an ISO 9001 that's immediately in place. For environmental, we need to have an ISO 14001 certification. For occupational health and safety, there's an OSHA 18001. Then we have ISO 27001, which talks of information security. ISO 27002, it talks of risk, but moreover, it's focused on as a guideline, not as a certification, as an ISO certification. So these are the things, and then there is an integrated management system. So that encompasses this and more of the management system, safety systems. For this, it needs to be very clearly defined in the project execution plan. The HSC compliance, rather the HSSC compliance and the awareness trainings, a training calendar should be there, compliance register should be there. There has to be a proper audits to ensure that there is proper compliance of the health, safety, security and environment. Then some of the things that as part of our responsibility towards the environment and towards health, safety, we monitor the LTI, that's lost time incident. That is whether there was a disruption due to any incident which might have happened. Incident might be an accident, incident might be a death, or incident might be anything which has disrupted work. So we are talking from both perspectives. We are talking from our productivity loss, as well as we are talking of the actual loss of human life, or the things that might be there, and the preventive measures that needs to be taken immediately if they have not been taken care of, and a proper monitoring of why this particular incident happened. Monitoring the paper usage, that's one of the things. usage. So that's again one of the things that should be part of the execution plan. Should be very clear that the awards and recognition should be given to people who are adhering to all these standards in total. So it's very important, and these things, maybe the finer details might not be mentioned in the project execution plan, but it should give an indication that yes, the project execution also talks of the awards and recognitions. The PEP should be very clear on the implementation of HSSE requirements set by the owner. So that should be very clear, otherwise we might be going in a different. That we need to develop the culture. It should not be a one-off incident. It should be part of our way of life. Next, we come to the procurement management. Now, for procurement management, we are talking of vendors or the subcontractors. Now, the type of contracts might be an agreement with a subcontractor or vendor or the manufacturer. Might be a fixed price or a lump sum type of contract. So a lump sum turnkey contract. The risk is all part of the main contractor or the subcontractor or the manufacturer. So we take care of everything, and it's a fixed price within the parameters of time. Time and material. If we do not have the end in mind, or if we do not know the magnitude at the end of the project, then we might use a time and material. It has a very cascading effect on the overall project profitability. So we need to be very careful when we are awarding a contract on the time and material philosophy. Then there is a cost plus fee. So the plus value or the plus component on the cost is predefined. So for every item, the vendor or the manufacturer submits the bills, and he or the vendor puts a particular fee component which is predetermined. Cost plus percentage of cost. So irrespective of whatever is the cost, there is also a percentage of cost. So it might be, we might agree on a 2% or a 10% or a 15%. Again, this might become very harming. Have to listen to this, or might have to follow this. And cost plus fixed fee. So a cost plus fee might be again dependent on the cost plus item, where on the cost of a particular item, whereas a cost plus fixed fee talks of irrespective of whatever is the cost, the fee remains the same. Procurement management. Unrealistic schedule and cost expectations for that. First of all, there might be a conflict of interest. That is one issue that might come up, or there might be a contract, and there might be a conflict between whatever is the existing contracts and the relationship with a particular vendor. So a particular vendor we might have a bad experience with a particular vendor, but that might be the only vendor. So those are some of the risks which we'll have to take care of during project procurement management, sorry. Then potential delays and impacts on cost and schedule. So that's again one of the things that we need to be very careful while we are making the plan. The final thing, that the risk which we could think of is questionable past performance for vendors. Without going into details, one of the classic examples we might say is the Commonwealth Games that happened in Delhi a few years back. For some of the suppliers who were supplying some of the key exercise or the games equipment, questionable past. Then it talks of the procurement management in the product execution, talks of the multiple suppliers, it talks of the interface, it talks of coordination, and we should always have a performance metrics for procurement activities, because we would not like a procurement a vendor to be used as a one-off incident. We would like to build relationship. We would like to build a particular procurement vendor. We would like to build a particular subcontractor. So this can only be done when we have a proper mechanism to measure the performance. Now the other thing which is very clearly defined, it again comes from the communication, is the responsibility matrix. Clearly it follows the RACI concept: responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Responsible is the person who is actually doing the work to achieve the task. Accountable is the person who's actually checking and approving that the deliverable or the product, the output that has been prepared is up to the mark or adhering to the scope of work clearly defined at the start of the project. Consultant are the people whose opinions are sought, who might maybe a third eye review or some particular expert who may or may not be part of the particular task force. And informed are those people who are just being kept in the loop of things so that nothing is missed out and they don't become the people who might create nuisance at a later stage. Then we talk of progress management. Very clearly, we talked of every PEP should have a very well-defined project schedule, should have an S-curve, look ahead plans. We discussed these things at the start of the presentation. Milestone management. Now this is one thing which is more of at a management level or a high level. It's very clearly there's something called a milestone tracking. Now that's again one of the things that we have been using. So a milestone tracking, instead of going into the nitty-gritty, we track the milestones, and since the milestones are all linked to activities, so the moment there is a slippage or there is some deviation in the milestone from the schedule, we know that there's something wrong. So we get into the detailed analysis and the detailed dissection of a particular schedule. Then for progress management, it's very important to have a proper earned value management system in place. Document management, very clear that we should have a proper numbering procedure which should be part of the project execution plan at the initial stage of the project itself. We should have revision control mechanism in place. Traceability. Now the most important thing which we keep saying to our document controllers is that it's not how you are maintaining, or it's not where you are maintaining the document, it's how easy is the retrievability. If we are able to retrieve a particular document or a particular information immediately, that shows the effectiveness of a particular system. So everything, the document management system should always have the traceability at the back of the mind, that yes, how a particular document can be traced or retrieved by spending minimum time and minimum effort. Because like I said, the documents which will be required, it's like the change management. The documents will only be referred and it will only be required when we don't have time. So it's not required for reference. It's almost 90% of the time it's required for at times where it's crisis or it's very urgent. So if we don't have a proper traceability mechanism in place, that's the beginning of the end. And the proper archival procedure should also be in place. For reporting, it's very clear the frequency of reporting should be very well defined, whether it's a weekly, fortnightly, daily, monthly, what sort of a reporting should be there. The metrics that should be reflected in the reporting, in the report should be very clear, that what are the matrices that are there. Maybe a productivity analysis, a cash flow, invoicing, then the S curves. So what are the metrics that needs to be there in terms of quantifiable items? Balance all can be in a descriptive format. Who is the responsible person for generating? Who is the responsible person for checking? And who are the responsible stakeholders to whom it should go? That's very important. And then the table of contents. At the very beginning of the project, the report should have a very well-defined table of contents. And that should be followed to the maximum extent possible. Otherwise, if we keep changing a table of contents, it's effort and it goes into a lot of wastage of time. Then the communication management, like I said, the contact details, very important, should be very clearly mentioned in the project execution plan. Format, language, what are the details that need to be there? Time frame and frequency for communication. Like I said, that communication, maybe we might have a weekly teleconference, or we might have a daily inflow and outflow of data, of information of the status, the frequency, confidentiality aspects. Now that's again a very important aspect that we should be taking care of. There are some projects which we have executed where it has become very important that the documents cannot leave a server. It should be, it remains on a particular server. We cannot take a printout. We cannot access, only the people who are authorized to access the server, only they are the ones who can access a particular document. Otherwise, it's not that everybody can access the particular folder on a server. So confidentiality aspect, depending on the confidential nature of a project, the confidentiality aspects are taken place. Mode of communication, formal, informal, should be very clearly defined. That informal, it's just informal. So any telephonic conversation, for example, remains an informal mode of communication. So that should be very well defined in the project execution plan. Maybe it can be streamlined, it can be formalized by writing a mail immediately after the conversation ends on the telephone to formalize it. But that should be very well defined. The communication objectives. Why do we need to have communication methodologies in place? That should also be very clearly defined in the project execution plan. Common terminology and the stakeholders. Now another thing that comes to that is very important part of project execution plan is the risk. Risk management, it talks of identification that can be through brainstorming sessions or having an expert opinion, through questionnaires and interviews. Then a project risk checklist is prepared, that what are the key risks. We prepare a project risk checklist, historical data or past project experiences. So maybe a documented historical data, or some of the people who might be part of the task force might have those past project experiences. So various ways of identifying risks are these. Some of these are these 6 points that I've highlighted over here. We do a proper analysis based on the probability and severity category. We put them into A, B, C, D. It's just an example which is being shown over here. The parameters can be defined based on the project nature and based on the agreement between the key stakeholders. So probability level, we can have very high, frequent. If it is more than 70%, then we put it as very high. These are just samples, so it's just something which we have been using in one of the projects, so I put it over here. Similarly, severity category, we put it into 4 general categories, 4 major categories: cost, schedule, loss due to unsafe practices, and quality and reputation. So again, it goes into 4 different categories. One is catastrophic, critical, marginal, and negligible. Again, the factors or the indicators might be different depending on the nature of the project. Now, once we have identified this, then we put them into a priority, we map them, we multiply them, and then we put them in the risk matrix table. After that, we do a risk response. Once the items are identified, so if we see the ones previously, the items that fall in the red cells are the topmost priority, the yellow ones might be the second priority, and the green ones might be might be falling into the almost impossible and negligible scale. However, we just put it over here because we don't want to miss on them, and we don't want to take our eyes on those issues which at the moment might be almost impossible or negligible, but they might actually become very high. Then we talk of risk response. The 4 ways of responding to a risk is avoidance, reduction, transfer, or retention. So if a particular risk can be avoided, we just avoid it by taking some alternate measures. Reduction of risk, we reduce the probability and impact based on various augmentation of resources or cost to an acceptable threshold level. So we reduce the risk. Risk transfer, one of the classic ways of transferring a risk is that by taking an insurance. So we just transfer that risk to an insurance company. So we still have a risk. We are still not maybe we are still not away from that particular thing. We are still responsible if there is a delay or a cost, but still we are not. We are transferring it and we get compensated. So that's one of the ways of transferring a risk. And risk retention, that we don't do anything because we feel that it might be very rare that this risk might actually come into play, and we take care of it in the contingency or the management reserve. So we just retain that risk. We don't do any mitigation to that risk, particular identified risk. Typical risk reporting, risk ID, it has to be unique. What is the risk type? What are the risks? What is the trigger mechanism? What might be the effect? What is the improvement action? And what is the due date for improvement action? Who is the responsible person for the action? And what is the severity and probability? Now this is the reporting, and it's a very live document which is being maintained, but they are very well defined in the project execution plan right at the beginning. So after risk, we come to the quality. We need to be very clear. Like we said, quality is again one of the prime things. We cannot run away, or we cannot have any slack in quality. Quality talks of compliance of contract specifications, quality standards, application of best practices and lessons learned. Lessons learned is basically historical data. Improvement by quality audit, monitoring and surveillance checks for project success. Customer satisfaction and complying with the project requirement. We are not talking right now of gold plating. We are not talking of giving something more than what is required, because quality is very clear. Quality talks of meeting the requirement. It doesn't talk of giving something more than what is required. That is something which is a strategic decision. But if it is complying with the project requirement, that's from quality perspective, the project is successful. So we're talking of compliance of various things by application of best practices, improvement through audits, and we have a nice satisfied customer. Then we come to the cost management. Cost management, we talk of budget. Again, a budget, it all depends. It is always part of the project execution plan. However, depending on the nature or depending on the management or the project manager's decision, we might or might not share this particular data with the customer. But still, a project execution plan has a budget. It has a proper cash flow analysis, the inflow, outflow, invoicing. Invoicing anyways is shared with the client because it is agreed with the customer, and a change management, because change management is again part of the cost management, because ultimately any change is cost to a particular project. Then we come to the most important thing, that's the closeout and the handover. The last thing, we need to have a proper contract closure. By closing all the settlements, by closing all the contractual obligations, confirming that all the guarantees and warranties and all the equipment are in place, we have a financial closeout. Once the technical part is taken care of, once the contractual part is taken care of, then the financial closure takes place. in terms of receiving funds, in terms of our excess funds that is there, everything, the entire chain management. Once this is also done, then we talk of an administrative closeout. Administrative closeout talks of the archiving from the administration perspective. So we might talk of the closing out of the team, the archiving of all the documents, the proper retrieval. So that's an administrative closeout. And once these things are done, everything is in place, then we do an operational handover. So we hand over all those documents which are supposed to be handed over and which are identified at the beginning of the project. So once this is handed over, the entire our scope or our responsibility gets over as a contractor. The fundamental of project execution mantra, which should be the undercurrent or which should be the underlying factor in a project execution plan, is plan, do, see, and feedback. So if we follow this mantra, we plan it, we do it, we see it, and we feedback the particular thing. At times, the PEP has also undergone a change. But we have been very clear that the basic document, the master document, does not undergo a change. It's only some of the portions, some of the topics that are part of the project execution plan might have a revision depending on the feedback that is received. So that's for an effective or for a successful project execution, the mantra is very simple. It's plan, do, see, and feedback. So thank you very much. That was the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you so much for the insightful presentation, Mr. Kumar. I really apologize to the audience for the disturbance that was caused in between. It was due to some attendees that were left unmuted. We can quickly take up the questions now, Mr. Kumar. I'm just assigning a few questions to you. I hope you can see them up.
Just let me do that. Yeah, I can see a few questions. One of the questions that I can see is from Girish Kashyap. He's asked, do we need to prepare a PEP for every phase in a project or a single PEP for a complete project? It is for the complete project. That is when we have because the phases of a project again forms part of the master project. So depending on, say, if at times we have had a master agreement or a master an umbrella contract, for example. If it is an umbrella contract or a master contractual agreement where smaller projects are in place, and this master contract agreement is maybe for 6 years or 10 years, and then we have individual smaller projects which run for a smaller duration, which have an end date and a start date, then we can have a PEP for individual project. Otherwise, for fundamental thing and for effective mechanism of project execution, it's necessary that we just have one project execution plan for the complete project. So I hope Girish is satisfied. Now we come to the next question from Prashit Parker. Talks of change management is for work around activities, or is it predefined in planning document? Change management is predefined. That was actually what I have been stressing upon in this particular presentation. We would like to avoid firefighting. We would like to avoid a workaround. If all the changes, what are the modes? The changes can come from maybe a comment on a particular drawing, or through email, some comment or something which has, or some minutes of meeting during a meeting with a customer. Some things might come up. Customer might say, boss, why don't we have this also? Now that's a change. We should be very clearly, we should have a very predefined change management in the planning document. Otherwise, if we go in, then it comes into a firefighting mode, and that's the last what we want for effective execution. Then there is a question from Shrikant, which tool you are using to track change request? Well, we have been using the worksheets and our in-house access-based programs. So there is no such tool that we have been using for change request. It's all documented, it's all there, and it's an in-house program which gives the overview. There was one question which I would like to answer. Is that I'm sorry, there are many questions which are popping up, so I'm just taking questions at random basis. One question is from Jiten Kumar. It says, how can we decide KPI? Now the KPI, again, it talks of the key performance indicators or key performance index. We have to be very clear on what are the basic parameters that we are talking of. What are the basic things that we need to monitor for a successful project organization or for a healthy project. Now, depending on that, can be financial, that can be our human resource, that can be for the schedule, that can be for the cost, that can be for development of various goodwill with the client. So these things, if that is also one of the objectives of management while making a project execution plan, we can always have it as part of the project execution plan. So depending on what are the parameters that we need to monitor to ensure the key performance index. Okay, one of the questions that has been asked by Murugesh Kumar is that when there is a change request, do we need to reschedule the project or need to manage within the planned schedule? The whole idea of a change request is that it should be within the planned schedule. Now, there is a very good term that we use in project management, that's a time cost trade-off. So if the time is very important, if the end date is very important, then we put in more resources and we don't want to slip the schedule. There are two live things, or I might give two examples. No matter what, the Commonwealth Village was ready because that was the end date. So what did we do? We put in extra cost. Similarly, when a project, a refinery, I was also associated with a refinery being built by Kane Energy in Rajasthan. The project was to be inaugurated by our Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. So it was very clear that the end date was fixed, and do what it takes to ensure that things are happening within the required plan date. So the whole idea is to avoid changing the end date. But yes, if a particular change is very important, it's very essential, and it will actually impact, that's a mutual discussion between the customer and the contractor. Well, there was one question by Pradeep Mishra. It says, is cost plus percentage of cost type of contract valid in India? Yes, yes, it is very much valid. I don't want to give the example, but yes, it is very much valid. Depending on, we actually had this in one of the projects. So it is something which is very well known, and yes, that's the last thing which we want to do, because it's actually very, it might be a win-win situation. It might be a win situation for the supplier, and a lose situation for the customer. In this case, maybe the contractor or the owner. One of the questions that has come up is, how can we differentiate, by Vikas Javale, I hope I have got the pronunciation right, how can we differentiate project execution, different type of projects like IT, infrastructure, manufacturing, etc. As far as I am concerned, I have been associated with IT project to a certain extent when I was working in Reliance in the Infocom project. I have been associated with the infrastructure project. I have not been associated with manufacturing, because most of the manufacturing are not part of the project, but it's part of the program. Most of the times it's part of operations instead of a project. Then I've been associated with construction projects, with oil and gas projects. Fundamentals, Vikas, still remains the same. PMI, the fundamentals of Project Management Institute laid down in PMBOK, Guide to Project Management Body of Knowledge, remains the same. It just needs to be fine-tuned to execute different types of projects. Ramesh has asked a question which says, how do you control changes which can occur due to things which are beyond your control? First of all, it should be identified, and that is what I was stressing on when we are talking of early trigger mechanism. We need to have those early trigger mechanisms in place. We need to be very vigilant while we are executing so that things won't crop up at a situation at a time when it is beyond our control. So we should have those undercurrent. The indicators should be there. Our mechanism should be such that those the trigger points, the indicators come to us much before the actual thing has come or much before it has gone beyond our control. That is one of the ways. But yes, it's much easier said than done. So in case if it is something which is actually staring, glaring at our head, in our face, the only thing is we go into the management reserve, which has taken care of by some of the factors which might be part of the unknown unknowns. So management reserve talks of unknown unknowns. So that is we actually take it. But yes, the moment we touch management reserve, we should be ready to face the wrath of management. So that's very important. That's the most important reason that we need to have a proper project execution plan in place. How we define project goals has been asked by Daisy. So I had mentioned in one of the slides in the goals. Those are the broad parameters, broad guidelines. Now, depending on how or which one you want to focus or which you want to focus, we can identify we can define and quantify those goals. Is Mohammad Farooq Ahmed has left. Okay, Shrikant has asked that could you please give some suggestions for entry-level upcoming project managers? Well, Shrikant, I would love to, because that is what, unfortunately, at the back of the mind, that is what I would love to share my knowledge. I would love, that's something which I always love to do. I've already given you my Gmail ID. It's kumarsaurabh.ks@gmail.com. So you can always contact me later on. For starters, yes, the presentation that I've given, that from my side, I thought that I've covered lots of things. So if you take each and every point and you can go into it, I think, and any other question that you have, you can always contact me on my email ID. Then one of the very interesting things, how do you handle low non-performers during project execution? Venkat Prasad M has asked this question. Venkat, this is a very dicey situation which you always have. The whole idea is I'm not covered because my slides were running into, they were going pretty long. One of the things that can be done is that we identify every person has their own plus points, strong points and the weak points. We capitalize on the strong points and we work on the weak points. So that is the only way of doing it. And we might do a job rotation, we might do a scope role rotation, we might do a responsibility rotation. Still a person remains a non-performer, we hand that person to management. So that's the only way. But yes, you still have non-performers throughout in a project team. Then we have what are the changes made to the PMBOK 5 edition? Now that is beyond the scope of that is asked by Prasanna. Prasanna, what I would request is you can mail me on my Gmail ID and I'll give you the presentation which talks of the changes in PMBOK 5th edition. But this is beyond the present presentation. How oftenly, Jitendra Kumar has said, how oftenly we should do quantitative risk analysis. Now that's a very important question. Jitendra, what we have been, I can only share my experience. What we have been doing is that we have been having a risk management team, a risk team, and the table that I was showing in one of the slides of risk reporting, that's a very dynamic document. So the risks which are identified are immediately logged in that. But what we were doing is, I think every 2 months, if I remember correctly, we were having it in every 2 months. So we used to do a risk review every 2 months of a project, because the project was running, I think, into 28 months or something. So we were doing it every 2 months. But yes, it all depends on the magnitude and the sensitivity of a particular project. So there's no hard and fast rule, but it should be the risk manager should be very much aware of the tools that are being used and the risks that are being involved. Again, how is project execution plan addressed in PMBOK? I think that's beyond the purview by Sri N. I can just request you to send me a mail and I'll send you the details. How Krishna Kumar has asked a question, how relatively plan A and plan B should be planned? I mean, with least proximity, so that to meet good success rate. Well, plan B, like I said, it's the least used and it's the least prepared. Plan B is a revised baseline, and those are taking into consideration where the known unknowns. So a plan B talks of, that's the reason we have an early start, early finish, and a late start and a late finish. That's the reason we have Prism, we have at risk, we have various softwares like Pertmaster. Those are talking of the plan B. Now, and then it needs to be tracked. So plan B, if we are, we always have a plan B, but the problem is that we generally end up, I won't say generally, at times we end up in a panic situation when something is going wrong in plan A, and without actually looking into plan B, we actually start doing a firefighting on plan A. So we need to have a calm mind for effective project execution, and we need to implement, or we need to start working on the plan B, which should already be in place. Then one of the things is a very long question by Santosh. Before execution, how infrastructure readiness is managed? Say, as client said, take an X of semi-government client. They said infrastructure will be ready in a month. I think it will be difficult for me to read the entire question. Santosh, if you can just brief it up, because there are people who might be listening and I might not be able to do justice to this particular question. So if you can brief it up, I can maybe answer it properly. So what should we do? I think these are some of the questions. Okay, one of the questions I think which I just missed was by Kannan Sondarajan. Sorry for my mispronunciation. It talks of Kannan asked, committed cost versus actual cost. How do you track in the timeline? Now, in the timeline, it might not be the most appropriate thing because it might give a different picture. But yes, it is part of the earned value calculation. CPI actually talks of the earned value by the actual cost. So when we have a CPI indicator in place, anything above 1 is always good for the project. Anything below 1 is bad for the project. So that is how you track a particular project health. So that's how project health is taken care of. I can see some more questions. What are the effective ways to check and control reported earned value? Now, the things that I have, if you go through the presentation, there are by P.V. Venkat Rao. If you go through the presentation, there are many tools which I have mentioned. So those are some of the parameters by which we can, those are some of the ways by which we can check and control the earned value. And I would be more than glad to help you more if you contact me on my Gmail ID. Ashish Jain has asked me a question: what is the importance of Plan B, and at what stage we should start looking at Plan B? Well, ideally we should never be in a position to look at Plan B. But yes, if the things are going beyond control, beyond the manageable area in Plan A, then it's high time that we also look at Plan B. But by saying this, as a good project manager, we should always have Plan B in sight. We should always know, even while executing Plan A, while everything is going fine in Plan A good project manager always has an eye on Plan B, so that Plan B is not used and Plan B doesn't come into picture when Plan A has failed. If Plan B is to be implemented, it should be preparedness at 100%. So maybe looking at Plan B should be right from day one, but yes, implementation of Plan B can be when Plan A has failed and it is beyond control. So I think these are some of the questions that have come to me, and I think I have taken a lot of time, and thank you very much once again for spending time with me on a Friday evening. It's already evening, it's 6:20 in India. So it was really nice making this presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Saurav, for the presentation. I'm really thankful to you for conducting this webinar. It was a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for the support in making this webinar a success. The recording of this session would be available on techgeek.com by tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.